Hello, dear learners. I welcome you again to this MOOC on population and society. In the previous week, we have discussed the first two modules of this MOOC, which has given us a brief overview of what is demography and what is the relationship of demography to other academic disciplines. In the first module, we have learned that one of the vital aspects of demographic study is the study of population change. Now, there are primarily three determinants of population change. They are fertility, mortality, and migration. In this module, that is module number 3, we shall be discussing the first determinant of the change in the size of population, that is fertility. The basic objective of this module is to explain the concept of birth and fertility, to introduce in brief the different data sources of fertility, discuss the factors affecting fertility, to discuss the causes of low fertility in developed countries and the causes of higher fertility in developing countries. So let us now try to understand the concept of birth and fertility. Birth is the process of being born, the inception, the beginning of life when an individual comes out of his or her mother's womb. When we talk about birth, there are usually two types of birth. One is live birth and the other is stillbirth. Live birth denotes the presence of life in the newborn. When a newborn baby shows signs of living, that he is alive, that means it is a live birth. Stillbirth, on the other hand, is the extraction or expulsion of a dead fetus from the mother's womb. It is the death of the baby before or during the delivery. It is considered as a stillbirth when there is a loss of baby in the later weeks of gestation. According to the World Health Organization, a baby who dies after 28 weeks of pregnancy but before or during birth is called a stillbirth. There are nearly 2 billion stillbirths every year, one every 16 seconds as per World Health Organization report. So we have now understood what is birth. It is the process of being born, the process through which a new life is born. Now let us discuss the concept of fertility. According to Lewis and Thompson, fertility is used to indicate the actual reproductive performance of a woman or groups of women. Fertility has been defined by Bernard Benjamin as fertility measures the rate of which of population adds to itself by birth and is normally assessed by relating the number of births to the size of some section of the population, such as number of married couples to number of women of childbearing age, that is an appropriate yardstick of potential fertility. Thus, fertility in simple words implies actual birth performance of women or a group of women to the relative frequency with which birth occurs in the total population or in the population exposed to it. It is the actual production of live offsprings. So, fertility is actually what? It is the actual production of live offsprings. Birth rate is a simple indicator of fertility. Now, demography as a subject which deals with the study of population has traditionally been focusing on fertility. The fertility, the circumstance in which live birth occurs with the aim of predicting population changes in particular. So now we have understood what is birth, what is live birth and stillbirth, and what is fertility. So let us now go to another concept, that is fecundity. We have often heard the term fecundity, and most often there is a confusion between fertility and fecundity. However, in simple words, fecundity implies the ability or the capacity of a woman of a childbearing age to conceive or to bear a child. Thompson and Lewis have defined fecundity as the biological potential or the physiological capacity of a woman to participate in reproduction. Thus, fertility actually is the result of fecundity. Fertility is the number of children born to a woman, while fecundity is her physiological potential to bear children. So, while fecundity refers to the potential of a woman to produce or to reproduce children, fertility is the production of actual number of children or the actual production of live offsprings. Now, fertility is one of the key determinants of population growth and change. We all know that society comprises of human beings, and the very survival and existence of human societies depends upon continuous procreation or reproduction of human beings. The survival of society depends upon the continuous addition of new members through the process of reproduction. Without human beings, the society cell cease to exist. Therefore, human fertility is responsible for the biological replacement and maintenance of society. So, what biological replacement means here is, people die and they are being replaced by newer offspring, so birth of newer offsprings. The growth rate of population of the world depends largely on fertility. Therefore, human fertility is the process through which the society reproduces itself. Therefore, in population dynamics, fertility is very, very important because it is the driving force through which population expands. Even though fertility is basically a phenomenon related with physiology or medical science, but it is widely studied and researched in social sciences as well. Because fertility is influenced by a number of socio-economic factors and conditions, and fertility also has its impact on the larger society as a whole. That is why processes such as birth and fertility is of immense importance in various academic disciplines like demography, sociology, economics, so on and so forth. So, I hope you have understood what is birth, what is fertility, how is fertility different from fecundity, or how is fertility in fact related to fecundity, and why fertility is a very important population determinant. Let us now try to understand in brief what are the data sources for fertility. As I have already mentioned, that fertility is an important determinant of the changes in the size of population. Therefore, for every nation, it is very important to keep records of data on fertility in order to frame policies and programs for human welfare, for human population development, so on and so forth. Therefore, every nation keeps records of birth and fertility. Now, if an individual, for whatever reasons, for research, for further studies, for all these reasons, if an individual or an organization wants to acquire information on fertility, he can look up to different sources. The sources are census data. Next is the registration data. Civil registration system also records birth, records fertility. So civil registration data is also another important source of fertility. Then sample fertility surveys conducted periodically across the globe is also very, very important data source for fertility. The Demographic Yearbook, published annually by the United Nations Organization, also contains data and information on fertility and related aspects such as age of the mother, sex of the baby, crude birth rate of rural and urban areas, so on and so forth. So there are different sources from which we can gather information on fertility, or from which we can gather data on fertility, fertility rate, so on and so forth. And these different sources like census, registration data, or the different surveys, we shall discuss them in details in the coming modules, that is module 6 and module 7. So dear learners, let us now discuss the different factors which influence or which impacts or determines fertility. There are numerous factors which influences fertility. The first among them is the biological factor. As previously mentioned, fertility is related to physiology. Therefore, one of the most important factors affecting fertility is the biological factor. And among the biological factors, the two most important are the age and sex. The reproductive capacity of a woman begins with her menstruation and continues till her menopause. With the menopause comes an end of the childbearing capacity of a woman. Therefore, from the beginning of the menstruation to menopause is the reproductive span of a woman. The reproductive span of a woman is usually 30 to 35 years, but it is not uniform. It largely depends upon the health of the woman, her food habits, the climatic conditions, her health conditions, so on and so forth. The better the health conditions, the greater is the chance of an improved fecundity in a woman. However, with the increasing age, the fecundity of a woman tends to slowly decline. Thus, a woman who marries at a later stage is likely to have lesser children because the fecundity of a woman decreases with age. However, there is no such limit in the case of men. Now coming to the next factor is the physiological factor. Physiological factors too affect fertility. Sometimes there are certain periods in a woman's life when she is sterile and is not able to conceive. The natural fertility of every population is influenced or affected by primary or secondary sterility among women or couples. Now, what is primary sterility and secondary sterility? The primary sterility means that a couple who has never had a child in their life, either by their own choice or due to their inability to have a child owing to biological conditions. The extent of primary sterility varies with the age of marriage of the females also. Secondary sterility is the inability of women to participate in reproduction after getting one or more children. Secondary sterility may be due to certain infections or diseases due to accident during childbirth. So when after producing one child, a woman is unable to conceive or bear another child, that is secondary sterility. Apart from the biological and the physiological factors, there are numerous social factors which also have a tremendous impact on fertility. And since every region has different socio-cultural values, therefore fertility rate also varies from region to region. Let us now understand some of these major social factors. The first important social factor is religion, which tends to have a great impact in fertility. Religious beliefs and orthodox values tend to govern conducts of human beings in many societies. For example, among the Hindus, there is a tendency that the birth of a son is essential for salvation of parents, and birth of a daughter is necessary for the act of Kanyadan, which is usually considered as a divine act. Marriage and reproduction are given therefore much importance among the Hindus. This desire to have a male child increases the number of children in some couples who have daughters at their initial stages and still continues to procreate for the desire of having a male child. Similarly, among the Muslims also, their religious beliefs makes them hesitant to adapt for child control or birth control measures. They also practice polygamy, and therefore all these results in higher fertility among them. So we have learned that religion and religious beliefs tend to have a very big impact on fertility. Next is the family system. Fertility rate differs on the basis of the type of family that we live in. In a nuclear family, or for families those who reside in urban areas, there is a tendency to have lesser number of children, because in such type of families it is very difficult to raise the child. Where only the couples are there, only the husband and the wife, it is very difficult to raise the child all alone, and therefore in such families, in such nuclear families in urban areas, it is very difficult to raise more number of children. But that is hardly a problem in rural areas with a joint family setting, because there are a lot of people and child raising does not become much difficult, and in such cases fertility is higher. Also, in joint families, one cannot deny that there is a pressure on the couples from the older members to give birth to more children, thereby increasing fertility. Thus, we have seen that the type of family that we have also determines our fertility rate. Next important social factor is education. Education plays a determining role in fertility. An educated woman having good awareness about health and hygiene is seen to have lesser number of children than others who are less educated and have lesser knowledge about health related matters. Apart from that, an educated girl prefers to have a job before starting a family. This also results in delay of her marriage, thereby reducing her reproductive span. Further, for an educated woman who has a job, it becomes very, very difficult for her to balance between her personal and professional life. And therefore, she prefers to have lesser children, maximum 1 or 2. Therefore, those countries where literacy rate among women is high, the fertility level is low. Then there are several economic factors like occupation, level of income, urbanization, which also has a tremendous influence in fertility. As we have previously mentioned, that in urban areas we often see that both the husband and the wife, the couple, both are working. Then in urban areas the cost of living is high. Families are usually nuclear in size. So all these makes it difficult to have more number of children. Therefore, the fertility rate in urban areas is considerably lower than in rural areas. Now coming to occupation, fertility is also influenced by the occupation of the couple. If the couple has a hectic work life or their jobs demand them to live separately, then they are likely to have lesser number of children. Again, some scholars also suggest that people who are engaged in works that demand rigorous mental work have lesser number of children than those people whose work or whose occupation only demands physical labor. Now coming to the social status of women. Social status of women is also another very important factor which determines fertility. In those societies where women are only confined to the four walls of her house, where the literacy of women is very low, where a woman is more or less always dependent on her spouse for her survival, for everything, in those kind of societies, women are not treated with respect. They are rather seen as a child producing machine, and her only duty is to produce child and take care of them, to nurture them. So in those kind of societies where women do not have decision making power, where women are dependent on their men folks for everything, in those societies women are always forced to have more number of children, because she do not have a say in the in her reproduction. She does not have any say in decision making regarding childbirth and child raising. But in other societies where the women are highly educated, they have their own professional life, they are independent, in those societies women have a greater say in everything, and therefore nobody can force her or impose her to go for childbirth. In such societies, women are treated with much more respect and dignity, and she is much more assertive of her choice and her rights, and therefore fertility is low in such societies. So we can say that in societies where women are treated with respect and dignity, and women have her own decision making power, fertility is lower in such societies, and it is higher in societies where women hardly have any decision making role, and where they are not treated with respect and dignity. Then another very important factor determining fertility is the political factor. We have seen that in countries or in nations where there is population explosion, where there is huge number of population, the governments usually make policies and programs to control the birth rate. They take different measures to implement family planning. So in such cases, the fertility rate tends to be lower. Again, we see some other countries where population growth is very slow, and in those countries the governments provide incentive to the couples to reproduce, because children are resources, and societies cannot function without population. These governments, in order to increase their population growth, incentivizes the couples to go for reproduction. Therefore, political factors also largely determines and influences fertility. So we have understood from this discussion that fertility is influenced by a number of factors. Biological and physiological factors are there, and on top of that there are also number of social factors which determines childbirth, which determines fertility and fertility rate. Now let us try to understand why there is low fertility in developed countries and high fertility in developing countries. According to the World Bank data, fertility rate has been declining globally. So there is a global decline in the overall fertility rate. The global fertility rate in 2019 was 2.4 children per woman, which is approximately half of what it was in 1950, that is 4.7 children. And in more economically developed countries like Europe, like Australia, like South Korea, these countries tend to have lower fertility rates than the lesser developed or the lower income countries. The main factors which are attributed for this decrease or for this decline in the global fertility rates are fewer deaths in childhood, greater access to contraception, and more women getting an education and seeking to establish careers before having a family. So these three main factors have resulted in a global decline in fertility. According to World Bank data 2019, the countries which have highest fertility rates are Niger, Somalia, Congo, Mali, Angola, Burundi, Nigeria, Gambia, Burkina Faso. These are the 10 countries which have highest fertility rates as per World Bank data 2019. On the other hand, the countries with the lowest fertility rate as per the World Bank data 2019 are South Korea, Puerto Rico, Hong Kong, Malta, Singapore, Macau, Ukraine, Spain, Bosnia and Herzegovina. So we have seen that the developed countries have lesser fertility rates, while the developing or the underdeveloped countries have higher fertility rates. Let us now try to understand the causes behind this. Developed countries tend to have a lower fertility rate because most of the people in developed countries desire for family planning due to their socio-economic factors and lifestyle choices. The countries having higher standard of living also tends to have lower fertility. There is greater urbanization in developed countries. There are a large number of working couples, nuclear families, and all this makes it difficult to have more number of children. Therefore, fertility rate is low. Again, in developed countries, there is higher education and professional careers among women, and therefore they are usually married at a later stage and they tend to have a small planned family. Further, in developed countries, women are lesser dependent on men. They are more economically self-sufficient and independent and do not have to rely on her spouse. She has the decision-making power and equal say in the family-related affairs. Childbearing, therefore, is more of a choice for her rather than an imposition. In such a situation where majority of the women are working and have an economically independent and affluent lifestyle, they tend to have lesser number of children. Then in developed countries, there is decreasing influence on religion. Unlike countries where religious and orthodox beliefs and values encourages people to have more children and makes them hesitant to adopt family planning and birth control measures, people of most of the developed countries are liberal, have liberal mindset, and their conducts are not governed by such orthodox values and beliefs. Hence, they are not hesitant to adopt birth control measures, thereby resulting in lower fertility rates. Thus, we have understood that in developed countries, because of the desire to have family planning, their higher standard of living, urbanization, higher education and professional career among women, and the decreasing influence of religion has resulted in lower fertility rates. On the other hand, in the underdeveloped or developing countries, the problem of early and child marriage, where women are married off at a very, very early stage, there is high fertility. Secondly, because of the orthodox social beliefs and values, people consider family planning as anti-religious. There is again preference for male child. All these kind of social values and beliefs which are prevalent in some of the developing and underdeveloped countries, fertility rate tends to be higher. Again, in developing countries or in underdeveloped countries, there is lesser female education. Literacy rate among the female is lower. There is lesser enrollment of women in higher education. All this results in women having lesser decision making power. They are more dependent on their spouse. They hardly have any say in the family related matters, and in such a situation she is forced to have children, take care of their children. Her only duty is to look after her children. She is more or less treated as a childbearing or child producing machine, and therefore fertility rate tends to be higher in such countries. There is also lesser social awakening among women in such countries. They are not aware of the health issues related to pregnancy or having, or what kind of issues and problems that she might suffer while having more number of children. So this less social awakening has also resulted in having more number of children or having higher fertility rates. Then higher death rate or fear of losing a child is also another cause of having higher fertility. In countries, again, where there is higher death rate, fertility rate tends to be higher because the couples fear losing a child, and therefore they go for more children because they feel that if they have only one child and they lose that child, then they will become childless, and therefore in this fear they tend to procreate more number of children. Finally, fertility rate tends to be higher in developing countries also because children are needed for the labor force. Further, it is also believed that children would take care of their parents in their old age, so children are needed. Moreover, lack of access to contraceptives and family planning measures, family planning ways, fertility rate is higher in developing countries. Thus, in nutshell, we can say that fertility rate varies across regions, across countries, because of numerous factors such as social structure, religious beliefs, economic prosperity, growth rate of urbanization, socio-economic and educational status of women, so on and so forth. So, dear learners, we have learned that fertility is determined by number of factors, and fertility rate has impact on the larger social structure, on the larger socio-economic condition of a country, which we shall be discussing in the coming modules. So, I hope in this module you have understood what is fertility, what is its relationship with fecundity, what are the factors that determines fertility, and why there is lesser fertility in developed countries while higher fertility in developing countries. In the next module, we shall be discussing another very important determinant of the size of population, that is mortality. Hope to see you in the next video.